Hey, Chris, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Okay, so Chris, we'll get started in a minute. So sharp
Okay.
at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So meanwhile, I'll just be on mute for a while, and we'll get started at. Oh, it's already 8. So yeah. So yeah. Hi friends. I hope all of you can hear us loud and clear. So we are here live with one of our very special guests, all the way from the African continent. We have Chris here, and Chris is he has like two interesting aspects to his background. So one is he is one I would say he would be a very good kind of person to kind of look up to when you want to transition from an altogether different field onto into data science world. And Chris is one of the best examples that we can get. The second thing that we'll also be kind of understanding from Chris is the entire journey as to how did he kind of transition into the space, and more importantly, what is happening in the African continent in terms of what are the progress of data science, which are places in Africa are kind of leading the I would say leading the way in terms of how beautiful how beautifully companies are using data science and AI for their own benefit. So, without any further delay, we'll get started with this session. And this session is primarily being live streamed on YouTube, and a lot of you are sitting here on YouTube. I hope all of you are facing no troubles with listening to me and Chris, and I hope our voices are absolutely clear. Now, what we'll do now is it's going to be a very casual discussion with Chris. I'll be having an ask conversation with Chris. I'll be trying to understand a few of the details, few of the background information that Chris would like to kind of share with all of our members here. So, Chris, what we do is to start the session to kick it off. I hope all of you are keeping you're keeping safe and you're keeping well back there in Kenya. And I hope COVID hasn't been of a big pain for a lot of you. I understand COVID times can be difficult, but I hope all of you are safe and sound.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so
And
good to hear that.
and and thank you for having me. In the country, we went a lockdown, but now the government has relaxed the rules so to allow commerce to happen. There seems to be a bit of a resurge on the infection rates, but generally, I'd
Hmm.
say we did okay.
Very nice, very nice. So I'm pretty happy to hear that as COVID times kind of progresses and governments they kind of start opening up the nations. Slowly, what we'll see is over a period of time. Obviously, you can't keep finance down, you can't keep commerce down. You have to start working, right? So I think yeah, there's a lot that I would like to learn from you today as well. So with that, Chris, I'll move on to my very first question. So if you can give a quick introduction about you to our audiences today.
Okay, so my name is Chris Orwa. Currently, the lead data scientist at a local bank in Kenya, known as I&M Bank. I also get to I'm a data journalist for a local newspaper known as Daily Nation, and also I do a bit of training, talkings, and workshops. So I just have a general interest in data. I've worked for the past 10 years in different uh, organizations. I worked for a telco company, for HR company, for research company, different data science positions. And I'm always looking forward to finding something interesting to do with data.
Very nice. So I understand that your background kind of requires you to kind of do a lot of analysis with data, and especially being in data journalism, which in itself sounds pretty interesting. I have a series of questions for you, and definitely one part I will be covering the data journalism part and how do you kind of become a consultant in the data science space, because there are a lot of people who are listening to you today live, and they would want to kind of learn from you what are the right techniques and what mistakes did you make in this transition. So we have a lot of questions for you, but then we'll try to keep it short and sweet. So let me get started with the very first question here, Chris. It's about can you walk our audiences? So let me just kind of tell you the background of it. So this is for everybody. So Chris started his career in the tech support space, and then eventually, over a period of time, he made quite a few of steps. Okay, quite a few of very well planned steps, which I think led him to the data science field. Now, a lot of you would be in a similar transition phase right now, and Chris would be a great person to kind of help us understand what are the steps that he had taken and how did he kind of plan out or chalk out his journey to get into data science. So, over to you, Chris. Help us understand Chris from tech support to Chris as a data scientist.
Yeah, so I studied computer science at Kenya University in Kenya. And the easiest job to get into was either to become a web developer or a tech support. And if you hated coding, you had to go to tech support, learn some networking. So I began working for local government parastatal. I was doing a lot of networking work and doing tech support. And after a while, I realized the work was very repetitive. Once you've mastered the basics of what you need to do, for me, the job became very boring because like, okay, my CD is not working, my network is off, do this diagnostics, and then that's it. So I had this thing like, I wanted to do more. I wanted to do something that I felt was more evolving. During the fourth year at university, we learned about data mining. And it sounds so interesting because every day you have something new. Today I want to predict stock prices. Tomorrow I'm predicting insurance fraud. The next day I'm predicting weather patterns. And it was not so, in a sense, I'd call it deterministic, that there's a definite answer. You're always predicting with degrees of certainty. You're trying to figure out how right am I, how wrong am I. And that aspect that I could do a job that to me felt very refreshing. I could work on several use cases at the same time. And once I'm done, I'm moving on to something else because I also loved, reading. And I felt like this data mining thing fits in with my, personality of reading a lot of things. I could apply a lot of knowledge that I know, and the work was dynamic. So having learned about data mining, at that point, the term data science was not invented yet. So I was like, okay, so if I pursue this, what would I be? Data mining practitioner, data mining consultant, data miners. I was like, okay, it doesn't matter. What I can do, I can help, I can predict stuff. So the very last course I did at university was about data mining, and I found it so interesting. So while I was busy doing the tech support stuff and connecting, when I was free, I'd sit down and then downloaded a couple of ebooks. So I would read on one method, and then I'm like, okay, how can I apply this method? Where would I apply it? So went and downloaded the software known as Weka. It's not a coding software. Then I would go find some random data set. Like, okay, today I've learned about logistic regression. How does it work? Then I go choose the algorithm from a drop-down menu, run the analysis, then see the outcome. How do you interpret the accuracy? Like, okay. Then next day I would go read about naive-Bayes algorithm. Then I'll try apply it on the data. Like, oh no. This algorithm does not work on numeric data. It only works on categorical data. So you have to convert your data into categorical data. I'm like, okay, go to Google. How do you convert to categorical data? Then you do that. So it started off initially as a hobby while I was still having the tech support work on my free time. I'd go find ebooks, and coincidentally at the same time, that's when Kaggle.com was launched. And a friend sent it to me. I'm like, can you check this? The thing you're telling me about. Read about this stuff. Then I went into people. I think I was like the first, maybe 100 people registered. I still have a badge for like the first people who joined Kaggle.com. Then I was like, okay. Then now I had a lot of data sets. I didn't have to go and find data sets. So I'd pick those data sets in the evening. I would go practice. So that's how I started transitioning into the data science world. But at that point, I didn't have anything to show that I'm a data scientist, or even if I knew anything about it. And then, so together with a friend, collected some data set about SIM card. Recharge cards for mobile phones, and then you're trying to predict which areas, how many SIM card get sold in different areas in Nairobi, in Kenya. We ended up doing something completely different, which was cool, figuring out some interesting thing about the serial numbers. And then coincidentally, which for me also, there was a local tech hub started called the iHub. It was supposed to bring technologies together. And they're like, oh, these guys are like, cool, let's write a blog post about what we've done and then send it to them. Then we sent them, they put up on the blog post. It became viral and like, okay, this is like a cool way of applying statistics and etc. Then at that point, I was like, okay, do you want a job? I was like, okay, I'm not sure, but I'm willing to try. So that's how I ended up getting my first job as a data scientist. And the first time I wrote data scientist. But that time it was like maybe a year or so. And the word data science was slowly now coming into use, especially in the academia and a few tech companies. Then for the first time I could write data scientist on my CV. I'm like, this is cool, So yeah, that's how I got started.
Wonderful. I think pretty impressive journey. I mean, all the points that you highlighted, I think the most important takeaway which I would possibly kind of want to walk out of the session with is that at the end of the day, you got to kind of showcase. You got to show that yeah, I'm capable of doing things. And when you kind of start marketing yourself, that's where people believe in you and they give you an opportunity. So that was wonderful. So coming to the next question, Chris. Now currently you are data scientist at INM Bank. So can you just define us what is your one day like? Like how does a data scientist lead a single day in such a big bank? So what do you do in your entire 8 hours or 10 hours of work?
Okay, so so at the bank, primarily how the data science team is utilized, we provide decision support, or we augment decisions of different departments. So on a typical day, because we operate in sprints, and the business department will have a problem that they need solved. I need to sell more credit cards. I need to understand my customers better. A certain trend has happened here. I need to predict something, and uh, there's an evaluation that this is a problem that the data science team will sort out. So it begins by sitting down with the stakeholders and deciding that this problem is worthy to be solved. Then we sit down and say things like, do we have data, or do you have enough data to allow us to make the predictive problem or an exploratory problem or anything that we're able to find enough data? Maybe we need 3 years worth of data, and maybe this product was launched 1 year, so we don't have enough data. So we make those decisions whether we have enough data to go through. Once we've had a checklist that we can do this, it's a data science problem, we have enough data, then like what approach should we take? Is this a predictive problem? Do we need to run some machine learning on it and do predictive work? Should we just do an exploratory data analysis to understand different features, characteristics, and distributions of all the parameters that are relevant for this problem? And then finally, how do we present? Do we just do graphs and charts? Do we create a dashboard for it? Do we write a report? So once that decision is made, then it sets up the task that will be done in the next probably 2 or more weeks. So once those are set up, the next thing will come in the morning, like, okay, number one, today is data collection day. The next 3 days, it's data collection day. So you start pulling data from different systems. I want a view of a customer, what they've done the past, 3 years, where they've gone to, what purchases have they made, and etc. So you start what you call your data wrangling in that case. So it probably take you 3 days for doing such a task. So once you have your data, then the next day, you come and say, okay, now I want to tease out a few things to understand more about the data. You check for outliers. You check, did I actually match this data correctly? Do I have any missing data? And so forth and so on. Some few things like averages, ranges, those things that tell you just to understand the data better. And then if you're satisfied with that, then if it's a predictive problem, now I have to sit down and I'll do the hard work of, do I use random forest? Do I use neural networks? What do I need to use? And that's a messy. Sometimes it's a messy affair. It's not a very direct thing. There's your go-to favorite algorithm, but to use it, it doesn't work. Then you have to iterate that process, and sometimes it may take you back to the data, like, oh, maybe I missed the reason why this is not performing well. I missed a certain type of data. So it's a very back and forth, and the data team you always work with a data engineer who is responsible for putting the data together and for accessing that data. And during that problem, it's just not you sitting down. It's asking, hey, I'm missing this. Pull this for me. Pull this together. I need a new table, and etc. But at the same time, you're also working, depending on the outcome for that, you either be working with a software engineer who probably will display your results somewhere, or you need a tool built for results. And also you're working with the sort of like the person within the department. Because one of the problems that normally happens is you get a problem, you dive under, you go do your thing, and then come after 2 weeks and then realize like, oh, this is not what we meant. So it's good to, even if you're just, taking care of the data, it's clean, go back to the stakeholders, like, okay, this is the data I have. Does this mirror anything that you do or you like, or do you think on the same path as whatever you do? Just to get a nod for that. So that's an iterative process. And most of the time, I like working with so many people because you get ideas much more earlier if you're going wrong, or ideas on how to improve that. Yeah, and then now becomes, if it's, for us, we love doing exploratory analysis because most of the time you have to take your results back to the business. They're not data scientists, they're not statisticians, they're not technologists in any way. So a model is just something that sits it's like a file that sits in a server, but you won't give that to the head of the department. You want to show like, okay, we looked at correlations, we looked at trends, we looked at seasonality, and those sometimes are more worth it than the final results for that. So you start producing those exploratory analysis charts and graphs that will allow you to make your final presentations for that. If it's a modeling process, then now you start having the very boring time. You come, set up your data very well, choose your training test sets, then start building the model. Then you sit down and start watching YouTube, waiting for waiting for the model to build it. Sometimes it could take 3 days for just a model to build, depending on how much data you have and the algorithm that you chose, and how you want to ensure that you're not having erroneous. You've not sampled well, and etc. You've not upsampled, downsampled well, and etc. So, kind of thing you do. And then that will consume, most part of your day. You'll just come in, tweak your code a bit, call it a day, and then you have your final day of putting everything together. Like, okay, then you go back from where you started. Like, did I do anything? Am I making sense? Did I predict this well? Like, okay, I went down a rabbit hole, and then you make some corrections, hopefully not too many, and then prepare a presentation. Do you want to make it a markup file? Do you want to make it, PDF, etc.? Whatever way you use in organization. So depends on the day. One day could be I'm working on a presentation. One day I could be talking to business. Other days I'm just on YouTube waiting for my model to finish running.
Wonderful. So data scientist life isn't after all that boring, right? You get an opportunity to watch YouTube while working, and you're getting paid for it as well. So yeah, that's the good part of data science life. But jokes apart, Chris, what I would love to hear from you is what are the most exciting things that you find at your workplace? What kind of work, or what parts of data science really excite you?
I think one of the reasons I got into data science even before getting to my current position is when you find insight that no one knew about, and it's very important. That aha moment, like, oh, did you know that people who travel actually save a lot? Yeah, because and that kind of thing. And then like, okay, you feel like you're some god that you have some information that you can use it for either making more money for the company or preventing certain losses for that. So personally, for me, that aha moment is when I discovered something that no one in the company knew, I did not know, and we can use that to make more money, or just for any other use for that. And this stems back from when I did my data mining course, and we learned about something called CRISP-DM, cross industry standard process for data mining. And the reason why they created that process was because everyone was doing some form of data mining on their own, and IBM had its own software. A couple of the companies built their own software. But they're like, how do we know we've made the right predictions? How do we know that your analysis even makes sense? So they came up with this crisp DM as a way of matching everyone's point of view. And they had 2 points. So if you say you've done data mining, you have to showcase 2 things. One, that you've produced information, insight, then previously no one knew about it. But secondly, this business information must be useful to the company or to the person, or because I could predict that every time it rains dogs bark. It probably is, maybe it might be new information, but it has a very limited value. So having those 2 points in mind, every time I'm doing an analysis, every time I'm setting up some predictive model or whatever, I ask myself those 2 things. Is it new information that no one knew about? Is it useful to the company? So whenever I dig through data and find those nuggets, I'll spend the rest, I'll come back home, stay the night like, okay, why is this happening? No, I want to find the causality. Why did this happen? Is it because people who travel are richer? Is it because they went to certain schools and they're taught by the same teachers? So I get into that zone where now I get lost in a rabbit hole trying to figure out why that interesting pattern correlation happened.
Pretty interesting. Very, very important point as to if something really seems intriguing to you, you oftentimes get so lost in it that you probably would end up spending some 80% of your day just thinking about it. Now,
yes, and the problem.
I was coming to that point. Now, this is actually a dilemma. So this could also end up being bad for a data scientist. How do you kind of counter that problem?
Yeah, so because if you look at any business setup, most of the time they want quick insights that they can use pretty quickly. I need to turn around this product. I want to, I'm having a revenue leak. I need to plug that leak. But if you have a researcher's mind, speed is not of your essence. It's like the reason why that happens for that particular case. That's what's more interesting to you. So how do you take care of that? So I suffered for that for quite a while, and I think if you sit with the head of department or whoever is responsible for the product that you are in, you ask them, what do you want from me? There is what they want from you, and there's what you want for yourself, right? So like, okay, I need 3 things. Give me a list of customers who are likely to churn. Give me a list of customers and I need to not worry about. Tell me which interventions will work. How long should I run this intervention? How would I know if this intervention works, right? And that is a job. Yeah, and I'm responsible for delivering those things for the job. So once you do that, or you do half of it, you can spend the rest of your time, doing all the other interesting things that you want to do for that. But at the bare minimum, do that. And to me, I've set up something that I try to remind myself when I'm going down the rabbit hole. When, for example, I'm writing a code and there's an error, I also have this problem. Like I want to solve that error instead of I could jump that error and write another piece of code, and I'll come back to this later. Also, I'm obsessed with solving that error. So anytime I've set for me to do similar task, it takes me 10 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour. If I figure out I'm spending more time on something, it reminds me I'm going down the rabbit hole. It's time for me to leave the rabbit hole, do something else. That's why sometimes I like doing 2 or 3 things at the same time. And then I'll come back to it or jump that section and go to something. So it's something you have to train yourself or find what works for you to escape that rabbit hole.
Perfect. So I think this is what we call as experience. When you kind of learn by failing, that's what is a great value add to your knowledge. So I think that's pretty interesting insight from you as well, Chris. So what we'll do is next, I would like to kind of understand some more finer aspects of your background. Now, this is something that is going to be really interesting to a lot of our audience today. A lot of them come from different varieties of backgrounds, and they all are kind of trying to figure out what is the right way forward. What should I do next? Now, can you talk a little bit about your experience as a consultant, then your experience as a writer? So you did data science journalism, which is a very niche field. It's a very interesting field. In fact, a lot of companies have started looking out for people who can write data science related articles. What drove you to get into consulting and then to journalism and then finally getting into a full-time data science role? So what would you recommend others? How should they kind of plan or chalk out their journey into data science journalism and data science consulting?
Okay. So my data science journey wasn't planned out. I didn't sit down and plan, I'm going to do this for 1 year, then do this for 2 years, and then move to this. It was never planned out. What I did was I was very good at capturing opportunities that came my way and to recognize very quickly that this is an opportunity I could be good at, and it's something I want to do. So when I started off, I worked for a company, which was a research company, but they started off data consultancy arm of the company. And if I had to give one advice, find a data consultancy company, because the amount of things I learned within 6 months was so immense, because we'd have like a 3-month contract on predicting likelihood of rainfall using satellite images. And all of a sudden I have to learn about GIS, I have to learn about processing satellite data with Python, convert that into table format, and then make predictions. And it is essentially learning on the job, and it was very tough because you have to deliver pretty quickly. Then you quickly turn that around, and the next day you're like, okay, you have to predict voter fraud from in an online voting system, and then like, okay, you start reading academic papers about how different people have approached that problem. Before we even finish that, you've been hired to classify accidents on Twitter from a crowdsourcing a platform. Like, okay, how do we process text data? How do we do clustering? How do we identify that these are the same accidents, and etc. So within a very short time, because I was doing different types of projects and I had to apply different methods, I had to learn new things all the time. My learning curve within a 1 year was so big, because if you don't learn, you won't deliver. As opposed to, let's say I got the job that I had right now as my first job, I'll be doing finance related stuff for 2 years, and that's the only thing I would know about. I'm using the same tools, same techniques, and at some point I pretty much know, I'm tweaking more than building new things. And as a consultant today, using Python. Another company insists that you have to use R because that's their system. And that comes to like, okay, you can do it in Python, but we need the final project in Java. And like, okay, can you use CattleDB for this? Can you use, so, learn so many tools in a very short time. It grows your knowledge. And sometimes your data science work has to interface with an end user. So your work is not just to create a model. Your work is not just to create charts and graphs. You just have to go the extra step and figure out how that will be embedded to the client's systems. So you end up learning about system development, a lot of DevOps work. How do you scale data science models? Because like, okay, you build this model, give us an API that would we can run against it. So I would advise, if you can get a consultancy work as a start, great, because you learn a lot in a very short time. And so how did I end up in data journalism? So to me, because I was more fired up and I was like, what can I do with this data stuff? So one of the things, so when I joined this company, they were encouraging people to blog about what you're doing, what your experience is like, just anything, just to create that interest about technology in Kenya. So they don't care how basic it sounds, they don't care how it is, just write. So just encouraging people to write. And I was like, okay, I'll write my experience, whether I know what I'm doing or not. I'll just write, today I did ABCD, my laptop crashed, this data set is too big for this laptop, all those nitty-gritty things that, and then all of a sudden, those articles started getting a lot of interest, like, oh, I didn't know about this. Oh, we're having similar problems. Oh, this is a unique way of tackling this problem. So the more I kept on writing about the experience, the company approached me like, hey, we think you're your perspective of using data to write stories is very interesting. Would you mind to contribute to our publication for that? So that's how I got started with the data journalism part. And I'd say that you have to place yourself, you have to do something, right? And if you do it for a while, you have to be consistent. And if you're getting it right, at some point, either someone notices you that your work is great, or you have some interesting perspective to it. But to me, it's because anytime that I was not at work, I was at home, doing some, just messing up with things. And at that point, I didn't care whether I was right or wrong. I was like, I just need to keep on doing. And I think the best thing I was told, like, people learn more by trial and error than actually reading. Reading is good, you get some basic knowledge, but it's still trial and error. Realize, like, okay, now it's my time for me to dump Weka. It's time to go to R. You mess around with R, like, R is a memory hog. It's time for me to move to Python. Oh, Python is great, but this thing called Julia, it combines the best of R and the best of Python. So don't feel sad for leaving R. Yes, and yes, attend a lot of events. Any event that was around about data stuff, I always popped myself in.
Wonderful. I mean, great insights. I think the most important point that we should all kind of carry from this answer is you've got to try. I think that is the only thing that possibly will get you there. It doesn't matter if you are kind of spending hours in front of YouTube videos, or you're studying 100 books. It doesn't matter as long as you don't put it to use. So get it working, get your hands dirty. Failure is a good thing. I mean, as long as you fail, you're still learning. So I think Chris kind of resonates well with all of these pointers, and the way Chris has made the transition, that definitely speaks volumes about Chris. So wonderful, Chris. So what we'll do is, the next question that I have for you is around data journalism itself. Now, a lot of companies, and in fact, across the globe, I've seen a lot of companies have now started opening up opportunities on the sides of data journalism, data consulting. So can you recommend some platforms which you may have widely used, or you may have found it useful to reach out to customers across the globe? So any platform that you would recommend our audiences here today?
Yeah, so my journalism journey has been, quite different. Yeah. So I know that the couple of ones that offer to write technical articles about different topics for that. But for me, I've mostly worked with mainstream media that want to spice up their stories using data. If you're in Africa, you could check Code for Africa. They have different chapters, Code for Kenya, Code for Nigeria, but they have one organization called Code for Africa. And they figure out that they want to tell better stories using data. So they have all sorts of data around, and then you join them, you take the data, you analyze it, you give them something to say. You can either write it, or they'll pair with someone to do that. So I've done that with the Code for Africa. For technical articles about specific data science, there's a page on Medium called Towards Data Science, and they invite people to write any article. You just write your article on medium.com, and then you publish to them, and then they'll make it available for about anything else. It's not a paying job, but it's a way, if you just want to, like, okay, this is how I analyze rain data in India, or this is how I analyzed people movement in India, or it doesn't have to be that. It can also be about how to use support vector machines to predict lung cancer in patients, or something like that. Or like how to choose the best algorithm when you have this type of data. So you can check towards datascience.com. You can write for them. Anyone writes for them. Apart from that, to me personally, it has been so wide. The data journalism part, I've done technical articles, and I've written 2 papers on it. If you care about the academic part, there are several free academic publishing websites. You can just write your paper, drop them there. If you want to write for, if your writing is more of blog based and you don't want to care about language and how to structure paper, go to medium.com, approach Code for Africa if you need anything around Africa. Globally, I know it's so. I know Al Jazeera was doing something about that was a while ago, like 5 years ago. Which other could I talk about? If you want to become a professional data journalist, that you work because you don't have to work for an organization and do predictive models. The Economist is very good. The Economist is they have right now. If you read The Economist now, there's a back page which is dedicated to a data story, and it's actually data science stuff, predictive modeling, forecasting, and etc. They're like one of the best media companies that have a data part from it, and including the normal stories is full of data. So you can check with them. And I think is it The Guardian? They're also moving towards, they're trying to set up sections where you can just do data stories. But one of the things that probably that I learned, there is the application of data science in stories, and there's writing technical articles about data science. Technical articles for data science would either fit into academic paper, or they'll fit into blogs that people read, that I want to figure out how to make my algorithm run faster. I want to choose this. So those are the two areas you apply them, but that you'll write for. But if you want to apply data science in the real world, then the media is the best place to go to. And then you find media organizations that are set up for that, or are willing to have that as part of their data story journey.
Awesome. So I think, Chris, now that you picked up about Africa, and Africa is definitely one of the fastest, I would say, the fastest implementers of data science. The space is going really fast in Africa. So we wait for Chris to put on your power bank, your power. So once he's back, so you're back. So you're, so now that Africa is like steadily growing to become one of the biggest implementers or beneficiaries of data science and AI, which places in Africa, like Kenya, I'm pretty sure it's like the hub right now for data science and AI for Africa. South Africa is also kind of picking up pace. A lot of startups which are the startup ecosystem in South Africa is also pretty thriving. So which parts of Africa you're seeing a lot of kind of growth in terms of data science and AI?
So it depends on the definition of growth. So generally in Africa, if you look at the economy, development of technology, and just how much is happening in academia, you have South Africa, you have Kenya, you have Nigeria, and depending on what you're looking at, also Egypt. So Egypt has, I believe Microsoft has a development center in Africa in Egypt. I think Amazon was probably trying to set up something there. Google also have, I think, the regional headquarters of Africa in Egypt. So you have a lot of technology that are being built in Egypt or set up for that. But now Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa have a very sizable startup environment, and startups are known to be the fast adopters of technologies such as blockchain, data science, etc. For that case, so those will be the three major hotspots in Africa. Egypt is mostly tech companies, American tech companies setting up in Africa. Most of them set up there. But when it comes to startups, technology, events, you find them in those three continents. If you look at any other metric like funding for startups, South Africa is always leading, followed by Kenya or Nigeria for that particular case. Some of it will in West Africa, some of it will spill into Ghana, and then in East Africa, you'll have Rwanda, because the Rwandan government is really trying very hard to promote data science, technology, digitization of everything else. I just know recently Carnegie Mellon set up a campus in Rwanda, and they have a master's in data science over there, and a couple of the government initiatives and subsidizing everything. But there has been I'd say so many companies coming out of there. So there's a lot of government in Africa, say government intervention for data science, AI, machine learning, anything to do with technology is in Rwanda. So depending on what you're looking for, those are the different areas that might be great for that. Here and there, you find them in one country or another, but the hotspots are those countries.
Yeah, perfect. So now we talked a lot about startups and we talked about academics. Can you also tell from the perspective of larger corporations? So how are the larger corporations in Africa shaping up for data science and AI?
Yes. So when data science and AI, was coming up 5 or so years ago, it was mostly driven by startups. And if I give an example of Kenya, you have these big banks that have been there for 30, 40 years. And now we have smaller startups that are doing, credit scoring via your text messages, or they go through your messages for mobile payments so they can figure out what loan to give you. And then, banks woke up like, okay, someone is about to take a piece of our pie. What are they doing? Doing this thing called data science. Like, why can't we have it in here? And now different startups were coming to take apart what most major banks were doing. So you have microinsurance going on. So, banks can no longer target that particular group. Now we have these micro loans going on for smaller traders and people within the lower income areas. And now they're locking banks out of those markets. So after that, within 2 to 3 years, the large corporates reacted by now bringing on board setting up the data science work. That's how I ended up working for a corporate. I majorly worked for startups, and then the corporates came in and they're going to show you the big money, and they're like, okay, you got to jump over. We want what you're doing there. I want you to do here. So in the past, I'd say 3 years, especially in Kenya, there's been a big surge in mostly setting up innovation centers within corporates, but also having data science as part of that innovation center. So it's usually targeting two things: digital and data science. They go together. So you'll find each organization has those two or a variation of those within there. So currently, I don't think there's any major bank in Kenya that doesn't have a data scientist or a data science department. All of them have. And insurance, which was a very slow adopter right now. I was just checking a few months ago. One of the largest insurance companies in Kenya advertised for data science role. So, and then the largest telco company in Kenya also has a data science department. So in Kenya, all the major corporates, maybe apart from breweries, I've never seen any of this. The largest brewer in Kenya, that's the only one I haven't seen. That and the airline, the largest airline in Kenya, Kenya Airways. So probably those are the two ones that I haven't seen them hiring for data scientists, but the rest have it there. Outside Kenya, in South Africa, it's a no-brainer. In South Africa, there's a lot of tech disruption there, and almost all major corporates have they actually sometimes corporates take people from Kenya and go train them in South Africa, then bring them back to Kenya for some specialized type of data science work that they need done internally. So South Africa, you go to mining, you go to telco, you go to banking, you go to insurance, you go to any field, and the data scientists are there. And maybe this is another segue to add more information to this. So if you go to the US, you'd probably be, analyzing drone footages or doing some fancy data science work. In Kenya, agriculture is the largest sector according to the GDP, contributes about 30% for that. So in application of data science work, there are all these new startups that are trying to increase the yield of a farmer, increase the yield per acre, provide better farm inputs, understand the supply chain for that, and they're applying data science for that. So there are a lot of data science role coming into agriculture. Similarly, with all these fintechs around credit scoring is like on steroids. In Kenya, I think right now even the central bank is trying to ban most of them because of high interest rates. But everyone is setting up some form of credit lending for the marginalized, or the we call it the bottom of the pyramid. So you'll have like almost 50% of data scientists in Kenya working either in finance, agriculture, and then a bit of them will work in health, because now there are a few research work as well as health-based startups and research institutions that figure out that we want to understand more for that. So you're either in health, agriculture, or finance. That's where the majority of them would go in Kenya. And maybe slightly South Africa is a much more mature market, so there's a much more spread in the industries. That Nigeria would be the same. You'll be in agriculture, you'll be in finance, yeah, maybe telco too, because telco is also big in Kenya and Nigeria. So health, telco, finance, agriculture, those are your areas. Won't be doing any fancy thing about recommending products buying like on Amazon. We want to be analyzing that. Those are there, but the like really smaller parts, and you'd be lucky to work on such projects.
Wonderful. I think this in itself makes Africa probably the most, look up to place, a continent where I think the next growth of data science and AI is going to take place, and it's going to be massive. I mean, Africa is kind of it's kind of spread out in a sporadic manner. Not everywhere data science has kind of seeped into the industry, but that actually is the opportunity that Africa currently holds. Probably, I would say the only continent which can offer not only a lot of different jobs, but it can also showcase a lot of different types of implementations of data science and AI. So with that, Chris, I just have one last question. Some interesting stuff that African companies or startups are doing in the space of data science and AI. So especially, I mean, you talked about agriculture, you talked about banking, finance. Banking finance is kind of a pretty common place where, data science has kind of seeped right into its roots. But talking about agriculture, talking about health, so what kind of interesting stuff certain companies are doing back there in Africa? So you can help us out with those details.
Yeah, so there has been this big concern that the reason why Africa is not competitive in the global market is because we have very poor yields. We don't use good inputs. We don't monitor. We're weather-based agricultural cycles. We don't use irrigation. So now, one of the areas that data science is applying is what they call precision agriculture, which means I need to grow my oranges at a certain humidity, at a certain temperature, at a certain soil acidity level for that particular case. For that to happen, number one, you need to have a greenhouse where you've housed your crops. And then now using IoT and gadgets, you can monitor the temperature and etc. One of the things that people are doing, they're taking the data from all these sensors, whether it's a temperature sensor, humidity sensor, and streaming it to a server, to a remote server. Once it sits there, one of the things you could start doing with that data is to recalibrate the instruments, right? When it rains too much, I want this to happen. And remember, let's say certain crops are very sensitive to different things. If the crop only relies on one aspect, like let's say temperature, that's easy to control. Just put a thermostat. But it requires a certain temperature, a certain humidity, water level, acidity level. So you can take all these inputs and then create a model, and the model will tell you what's the appropriate, based on ABCD, what's the appropriate way of recalibrating those instruments. So that's the first application of data science in agriculture, where you do precision agriculture, which means I need to taste a mango that has been grown at 24 degrees the whole season, acidity level at this, and etc. So that's one of the ways that data science is being used in Africa, or in agriculture, sorry. So, but that's a very tiny part, because it's a very specific market, the export market. Because if you're sending flowers to Europe, they're very particular about the flowers they want for that particular case. So this is in the horticulture industry, where there's a big application of precision agriculture for that. So you're looking at raspberries, you're looking at flowers, you're looking at all sorts of fruits that Kenya test. But then you have a very big market that does staples like maize, wheat, barley, and etc. And one of the projects that involved with is where you advise farmers which season what they should grow, because these are subsistence farmers who would grow a bit of maize for their own use, and then they have some few acres remaining. They're like, okay, it's better off to grow maize and then rice or whatever. So looking at the cycle of rains and etc., you advise farmers on which crops to grow during which season to make best use of the weather as the source for that. And that's the major application of data science in agriculture, advising farmers on what to do, plus a couple of other things, analytics that would help them just do better things about taking care of their crops, equipment, and etc. So that's in agriculture.
Yeah.
Sorry?
No.
One of other.
That was interesting, yeah.
Yes, one other application that I found very interesting was this. There's a startup which I got to know about them, and they have this thing like, okay, look at this. This is a mailbox. We're gonna reinvent the mailbox. Then I was like, okay, I've had so many things, and they said when you go to a hospital or to any place where you get served, and they have a suggestion box which says if you are, if you don't like the services, drop this paper here. Tell us. I doubt if anyone reads those things, or they just throw them away. But he created a system where they would install this system in, let's say, for example, a hospital. They'll install the system there, and they have a way of detecting when a customer checks in, let's say you're sick, and you log in into the system. So they have your records in there. Then they'll compare the previous time you came in, because every time in a hospital, every time you move from one, if you go from the lab to a doctor to a nurse, the information is logged into the information management system. So they'll realize like, okay, today you spend a lot of time between one spot to another. Then they send you an SMS and ask you, do you like the services being offered? We realize today you spend more time between registering and seeing the doctor. Are you okay? The people are like, no, actually I'm not okay. So they were able to get more genuine response, because they say like, it's the moment when you're annoyed, that's when you feel like giving the response. That's why people go to Twitter and rant. So, but now they can preempt your anger by analyzing how you're jumping in between, or like, hey, you've been coming back for the same treatment for the next, would you like us to have a doctor call you every month for this kind of thing? So I was like, this is so amazing. It's service delivery, customer service that I don't know whether they're still in business, but they were installed in a hospital and the bank to help customers manage customers' expectation, and they're saying they're inventing the mailbox or the suggestion box for that. So that's a cool data-based startup that I came to know about. Others, that's the coolest one. But others, I could say, they're more of like things you'd expect, but just application of data science into things that you had expected. Queue management, figuring out a way of actually on the health. That was in the health part, but actually before I worked for a corporate, I had a startup which they say 90% of the time when you tell a doctor, I travel, I'm having a fever, and etc., then the doctor tells you go for a malaria test or go for this kind of tests. So we went and picked doctor's notes and then the diagnosis, and then built this app where you just go say like, okay, I'm feeling a bit of headache, I'm feeling a bit of this, and then say like, oh, there's a high chance that you have tuberculosis. So this is not, don't take our word for it, but just go for a TB test. It might save you paying doctor's fees and etc., but so it was a way of not cutting off the doctors, but helping people cut down their costs, because sometimes you go to a hospital and you have to do 100 tests only to figure out that you have a cough for that. So just give us your symptoms, and then we will let you know what are the chances that you have malaria, what are the chances that you have a chronic disease that needs a specialist for that case. And then we point to the nearest hospital, we show you the average charges, and we can compare hospitals and the charges for that. So that's around health. Oh, I could go on and on, so feel free to stop me.
Pretty interesting case studies that you picked up. And definitely, I mean, that's what I was saying. Africa is the opportunity. You have like so many use cases and so many possible solutions, so many startup ideas, so many flourishing companies. And I'm pretty sure very soon the ecosystem will be like you'll find data science being involved in almost every company out there. So I think all the answers that we collected so far, it has been great, Chris. We got really awesome insights from you. Now, however, those were questions that I asked, but now what I'll do is I'll move the needle towards the audience, and the audience would like to ask you a few questions. I know we have already passed our time of 45 minutes, but it's okay. We'll probably take one or two questions, and let me just filter out the questions. So it's on the YouTube channel. So I'll just pick up some questions here, and then I'll ask you. Okay. So now there's a question here which is around how do you, okay, in your at your workplace, how do you kind of start with the problem? Okay, how do you decide, okay, what is the next step after you know the problem? So if you have a problem statement given by a company, what are your next sequence of steps? Are they the same or they keep differing with every project that you do?
Uh, they're definitely not the same, because most of the time uh, you have a problem that either a product manager or a head of department is facing, which could be my revenues are declining. So revenues are declining is not a data science problem, it's a business problem. It's what the problem that the business is facing. Other problem could be I want to sell more of this product. That's not a data science problem. That's a business problem. And given some problems are about preventing, you know, you'll be preventing something from happening, or you'll be selling more of things. In a corporate world, that's the most things you'd be doing, or improving efficiencies in certain thing you're optimizing for that. So the problem we normally face on those stations is like, okay, I'm on a prevention path, I want to sell more path, I'm on an optimization path. Then you choose like, okay, this is an optimization problem. I need, if someone is doing, if we're working at a contact center and the call center agent only answers 50 calls a day, but that's not optimal for the company, then we need them to move to 80 calls a day. Is there a way I can reroute the calls? Is there a way I can figure out characteristics of the customers calling so that they can be attended much faster to improve the number of customers served by an agent and reduce the people in the queue so that the customers have a general experience? So you can see how I've taken that problem on that particular side. And then, okay, I am losing a lot of customers or I'm losing a lot of revenue for that. So in that case, you figure out why are you losing the revenue. That's a totally different problem, because if you don't figure out why or the chances why that's happening, then you don't even know what to do. So that probably will say, okay, give me all the data about these customers for the past X years. Then you do an exploratory data analysis. You start comparing people by region, people by the type of devices, people by income, and then you start finding out patterns or correlations. And they're like, oh, actually, it's this region that you're losing a lot of people, or whatever thing you find out of your exploratory data analysis. Once you find that, then it defines what you have to do next, which is like, okay, what we can do, we can study, or we can predict, or we can do stuff. So this one has some idea. Okay, I want to sell more. I'm like, okay, just show me people who have bought things more, and I'll give you the characteristics of people who you should target for your marketing campaign. So it's not the same. It's very different, but generally it will fall in those three areas.
Okay, I think, yeah, your summary of breaking down to three different areas, that's a good starting point. So Chris, the second question that we have is now, so somebody is really impressed that you have made such a beautiful transition from in your career. So they're looking for some suggestions from your end. So if somebody, I mean, you come from a CS background, so probably one part of the journey, which is your the coding part, it's primarily taken care for you. But what about folks who don't come from a coding background and they want to transition into this space? So what is your advice to them?
Yeah, so one thing that I learned, coding is important, yes, and you need it. But more importantly, I like saying have an analytical mind. Without writing any code, without opening any notebook or IDE, can you explain the process of the analysis? I'll take this data, I'll do these comparisons, I'll look at this and that. That's the first thing you're supposed to develop. Because even if you go tomorrow and learn Python, uh, if you cannot figure out the analytical processes or how to analyze certain problems, it doesn't matter how good you are in coding. So first of all, develop that analytical mind in that case. Then figure out, where do I want to start? Yeah. Sometimes you pick whatever comes your way, but if you right now Python is the most used programming language in data science, so it just makes sense learning Python. I started with the R and then moved to Python because I started working on a lot of projects that the clients were demanding Python. So I went and taught myself Python. There are enough, if you're a self-learner, there are enough materials online for that. Other people need a class. Other people need a buddy who can, encourage them or teach them for that, depending on if you understand yourself and which learning cycles you have. But you need an entry, I'll say an entry project or an entry thing. Like, okay, I'm in finance and banking. Maybe I want to do health stuff. Maybe I want to do social media, analytics. Pick one thing, do it for a year. That's the thing. Once you do it for a year, you'll figure out so many things about it, some that you like, some you don't like. And then from there, you can branch. Branching from one area is very easy than doing a bit of things. Yeah, I know I started, although for me, I did 2 years of social media analysis before doing consultancy work, and I'd hammered the data with Python, with R, with anything, with Excel, and now I'd known the limits of all those pieces of software. So have an analytical mindset. That's something you can, for me, I didn't learn it, but I just went through what other people had done, either reading blogs, YouTube videos, and learn how the steps they were taking and how their thinking process was. After that, pick a programming language, just one. For now, if you're going to work for a corporate, you'll need SQL because most companies have data warehouses like Oracle, so you'll need SQL skills for that. But if you're not going to a corporate first, pick one language and preferably Python. Learn Python, learn how it applies to whatever you do, pick that area, give yourself 6 months to a year, and then after that, find your area.
Wonderful. I mean, great insights. It's after all about applying again. So very interesting point. So Chris, I think we are already way past our time, but I'll just take the last query here because I feel it's quite an interesting query. Where do you see Africa in the next 2 years in the space of data science and AI?
How do I see, sorry?
What do you perceive of Africa, or where do you see Africa in the data science and AI space in the next 2 years?
So one of the things that I'm seeing, especially when I look at the jobs in the US and Europe, you have this highly specialized data scientist. I was looking at one called data scientist product. Your work is to apply data science skills on how to improve products. There's a data science infrastructure where you're a data scientist, but you're looking at how servers and internet works and the performance of servers. So and so on and so forth. So you have this specialized data scientist for that. Currently in Africa, a data scientist is like a generalist. Today I'm in finance, tomorrow I'm in banking, tomorrow I'm in insurance, tomorrow I'm in agriculture. But the first stage that I see, as economies grow, as data science become more prominent, it will be applied in a lot of areas, and there'll be enough jobs for people to specialize in. I'm just a data scientist for a particular area for that. So that's one of the things that I think would happen. Then away from that is, Africa, they've always said that we leapfrog technologies. We didn't have landlines. We jumped from no phones to mobile phones. Right now, one of the things that's steadily coming up are IoTs, Internet of Things, and because they're slightly cheaper than the alternatives that are there. They're likely to be used in home monitoring. They're likely to be used in different areas where you need sensors for that. So as the growth of that happens, number one, there'll be more data collected. There would be areas where, since there's availability of data, and no one had thought about, okay, I want to, everyone has a bell on their cows. Maybe, hey, we can put a sensor on a bell or a cow. Then we can look at the migration of cows and how pasture is consumed with cows. So I see these interesting niche areas because of the uniqueness of how we acquire technology from the rest of the world. We may have this very interesting application area that no one else in their world has. So those are my 2 cents on 2 areas of where data science might grow into Africa.
Wonderful. I think, the future is, it's going to be really big for Africa, especially, I would definitely say, when you look at Africa as a continent, it's kind of evolving so fast, which is very hard to find in the other developed countries. Now, overall, there'll be tremendous opportunity, there'll be tremendous potential in Africa. And for all the things that you shared with us today, Chris, what I would like to say personally is, thanks a lot for sharing a new perspective towards data science from a different continent altogether. We have quite a few folks who are also attending the session from Africa as well, but then we have a larger chunk of folks who are from Asia as well. So, on behalf of all of them, Chris, I would like to extend a big gratitude, a big thank you to you for spending your time here and helping us understand how do you look at data science from your perspective and how do you make this transition. So that's all from our end. Thank you, Chris, for your time and for all the knowledge that you shared with us.
Hey, you're very much welcome, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we are glad that you're here. So thanks a lot. Yeah, I wish you also, be safe, and I wish everybody be safe. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So we may all terminate our sessions now. We are done for the day. Thank you.